Independent?
But this is a comfortable seating height.
I was a little scared there, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not. Does this open?
Yeah, it opens.
And there's your storage for that.
It's got a lock so you don't accidentally pull it all the way out.
Okay, so it took about a week to go from when Mark came to me. He's got a client that wants a single seat turn into a bed. We discussed for a minute. He was like, can we do that? Is that even possible? So it took us about a week of just planning, talking it out. I made like 3 different prototypes. They varied in width and depth, because when the first one I made extended from wall to door, but that went just a little too far into the living quarters than he wanted. So I slimmed it down, and that's why it only extends out to like 65 on the model we displayed there. It's because for the particular client, he didn't want it to stick out too far. They had a specific requirement in the walkway path, but you can still make one that would go from wall to door. You just would have it going almost flush with behind the driver's seat, which to me is fine because you wouldn't hit your shin on it. You'd be able to just kind of walk from driving quarters to living quarters with no problem whatsoever. So that's what we went off with. It was just a quick talk. When I first arrived, he's like, hey, I want you to build the shop out, but be thinking about how to make a single seat turn into a bed. So I don't know that anybody's done it as quick as this way, but it's definitely just robbing or reusing ideas from just things built in the past. These are not new ideas. This is just first time they've been combined together in a van that we are aware of. And this sander sound, let me know if it's too loud. I think I got it dialed down enough so it's not as brutal, because man, editing this video, I had it turned up and that thing was brutal. It's like some torture device there. Sorry. So these back pieces that I just screwed in there, I suggest doing it like in a 7-inch range, because you're going to have to cut off some of the bottom for your feet. Well, not for your feet, for the angle of the van. So leaving that gap in the back is a good idea, because otherwise you're going to have to be cutting extra material off. And the 7 inches gives you enough to mount it to the wall. We did double spacing for the bottom instead of going solid, because this one's going in a van with a radiant heat floor, and this allows us to have a little more visual to make sure we're not anywhere near a pipe. Because yeah, you don't want to nick one of those pipes, because the system is not a repairable system, and I do not want to be one responsible for doing that. Oops. So when I'm making these, build the box first, the outside box, because that's the dimensions we got to stick within. And then as you do the middle drawer, put your slides up, and two pieces of the ply that you're going to use for the size of the middle drawer slide, and just measure it that way. I had it predetermined measurement, but I like to do it that way because that is an actual number. The other one is kind of guesses, because your material might be 3/8, but it really 7/16, and so it kind of adjusts things. So just starting outside, working in is what works best for me. Not to say you can't do it the other way, but always double check and make sure you're cutting the right side. Helps reduce waste as well. Can you guess how many pocket screws went in there? I'm not used to these things. This is my really working at the shop's first time I really use these. I've done so many other things, ways of fastening, but they really like their pocket screws here, so that's what I try to build it, because this is going to be the kit that is sold by Marc of Nomadik Customs. So we got the K5 here we're using, and I marked on it to give me a center measurement so I don't have to measure my boards and try to increase efficiency with that machine. Anytime you can route and sand ahead of time, I highly suggest it, because it's going to really save you a lot of time, and it's a lot easier to sand that wood when it's flat versus when it's got an edge next to it. And preloading these pocket screws can save you a little bit of time as well. Having a clamp on there keeps it the top and bottom flush, and you only need it for that first screw. Then laying your piece out like this allows you to know exactly where the glue is going to go without having to do any extra marking. The less marking you do on the finished product, the better you will be. All of these pocket screws are going to be hidden bottom and back side, so you don't see them unless you like really look to see them. Always test fit, test your measurements. Good thing is if you made a drawer too tall, it's easy to trim off. Same thing if you made it too short, it's easy to add a top piece on it. We used edge band, we capped it with edge banding, but you could cap it with thicker wood if you wanted to. So if you need to play with that thickness, you can do that very easily. Actually, on that piece we did do that. Those cuts like that are not that dangerous, but you do need to be cautious when you're making cuts like that, because the table saw is a dangerous machine. The cut I'm doing now is I'm cutting part of the way, then I'm stopping the machine, letting it cool down, and I'll follow up that in a second with the jigsaw to get a good angle. But I first did it with the table saw to get a true straight line, and then the jigsaw just touched up to get the angle I wanted to just kind of help hide the wheels. And after we tapped it with a jigsaw, we'll go over to the osculating sander or a stationary belt sander, whatever how you want to phrase it. So unfortunately we use this machine so much after a week, it does start to wear on it, so I had to do a quick little repair on it. Luckily it was just a little screw came off. I don't know, maybe it was supposed to be tightened down out of the box. I didn't put this machine up, but it was just a quick screw, attached it right back, and it was able to go again. One of the first things I did with that thing after they mounted it was get the shock back on it. Now we've got the dust collector on it, so it won't have the high-pitched whine in the future, but the shop vac does give it better vacuum than a dust collector. Trying to remember to wear a mask all the time is really beneficial for your health. I mean, that dust stuff is always floating in the air, but when you're sanding, you're really exposing yourself a lot. Yeah, I just oops on that glue upside. It's no big deal. This is actually going to get a face on it, so I just wipe it clean and then let it get covered up at the end of, near the end of the video, so it's not a problem to have a little glue residue on this particular one. Test fitting where the wheels will get mounted. Then I will use them sitting in the location they're going to be at and just use that as my mark. I like to use the material versus math. Is just less room for error. I am not the best all the time with numbers, and so anytime I can just eliminate room for error, I try to. So this is a good angle to see where we did that cutout with the jigsaw. As for those wheel spaces, we did that just so it looks visually nice. We had to cut it up because that actually piece goes inside the middle drawer that also goes on top of the bottom. So just having that angle just kind of gives a nice aesthetic, pleasing look to it. And structurally it holds in the wheels better. It's such a minute difference, so it's not necessary, but it does help. It's a little thing you can do to make something look a little nicer. I prefer using odd numbers when I build things, but 5 wheels would have been a bit excessive. 3 wheels I didn't feel like was enough, because this will have people sleeping on it, standing on it, so I just want to have the extra wheels in place. This is me marking out to cut the face of the piece that's going to cover up that where I accidentally glued that. When they do the trick to get you some great radiuses is using a hole saw, and then when you got to trim it out, just get that circle cut out, a screwdriver or an extension bit works well to push it out. Having a block of wood underneath helps prevent chip out as well. It doesn't truly eliminate it all the way, but it really does help. Using a flat edge helps you get a good straight line when you're matching them up as well. Andy over here has become a little wizard with the edge banding, having to figure out how to do those radiuses. He's done a great job at it. One thing we're looking at probably buying is a curling iron, or we might see if there's something else, but I think a curling iron will help a lot on those interior radiuses like that. So the reason he's using that compressed air is it helps cool it down. He'll get something stuck good and then he'll compress the air to cool it down quickly. Really cracks me up, this music in the background, because we got it sped up at like 500%. It's really just interesting. I may prefer this sound than how it originally sounds. And he just trims it up with a razor blade, touch it up a little bit more with the heat, and then just sanding it. And there's not really a better way to do this other than just hand sanding it. So on the back set of one, the radius I can't use a hole saw bit trick on this one, so Brent's gonna mark it out real quick and just cut it out with a jigsaw. He has that high attention to detail, and then Andy's just gonna touch it up a little bit, and then glue this one up as well with the edge banding. But to the right, you can see all three pieces of the wood, or pieces of the drawers. From the chest to the interior drawer to the tree drawer. And it's just a different angle for doing edge banding. When I do it, I like to heat it up a lot, and then I'll grab a wooden dowel to help flush it down, mash that glue deep in there so it holds it up. And we trim right at this location and then touch it with a sander. Putty any little bit of chip out we may have had, and now it's onto the lid. This is like where so much of the math happened. First we're ripping out all the supportive slats. Oh no, first we did the pull out slats, and then we did 7/8. The 7/8 is what the size of this will become, because it's 3/4 with an 1/8 inch spacer. We wanted to have a 1/16 on, in theory, top and bottom for pull out, so it pulls out nice and easily. This is just laying it out. I use the 1/8 inch sleeve-on spacers. That way I know everything's exact. And then so I got everything laid out except for that middle piece. I went and cut the middle piece because to make it a perfect fit. Again, versus having to math out all those 1/8 inches. And now into the pre-routing and sanding. Again, I think you can get a much cleaner look with pre-routing something versus routing after the math. That's just the way I operate. A lot of shops just wait to the very end to route out, so you don't have these smaller pieces you're routing. But to me, it gives a full route all the way down versus having that little edge that doesn't get routed. Again, it's just a personal preference. Both work just fine. But there were so many pieces on this lid. Yeah, spending a couple minutes and laying out how you want the wood to look can really pay off in the end. Even though this part will be hidden really 99% of the time. The only time you're going to see it's when you pull it out to flip it over before you add the cushion. So down the prototype stages, I would not pay attention always, and I would bore out the sides. So I went and picked me up that Miles Craft joint made thing. It's like a $10 tool. Links below, but it allowed me to cut a lot or drill a lot straighter. So when I bored out the holes, they went straight into the wood. That way, when I put the dowels in, I didn't have any issues. And just screwing that piece down on the table gives you a little bit extra support when you do it. Man, from this angle, it looks like my fingers are goners for sure. So I'm just cutting these dowels at like 3.5 inches, putting a tip on them so they self-align better, and adding a little bit of a flute so that glue gets carried down, and then once it's in, mashes it around the wood so it locks it in a lot better. I personally really love dowels. I feel they have a really superior holding strength, and they give a nice visual look on the end. You can use mechanical fasteners, but the pulling it up and down, the amount of motion that's going to be on this piece, I didn't know if the screw wedges would kind of loosen up over time, where I felt these dowels glued in are going to lock in place and hold it. And where they are being hand drilled, and even though I'm using this jig, they're slightly not 100% straight, so that screwing them at these different angles will help lock it in as well. That glue dripping is not a big worry. We just wiped it up easy, and also the excess pieces, we're going to cut those off with a handsaw in just a second. And this is another way to use that joint mate. I really like it because you just go through, mark your lines, and then look for your line in the hole, and that's it. Just put it on there, twist it a little bit, and it self-centers it. It makes for a phenomenal tool. It's quick and easy. It even has this red piece on it. It's Miles Craft Red. It's a color red that you can use it to set the depth, so depending on what you're working with. Went through there to bore out the holes a little bit deeper, just so I can have more dowel go in there, have a little bit more glue. First one I didn't know we had a handsaw at this shop, so I did it with a jigsaw, and I nicked a little bit on the side. Luckily it was on prototype stage, so it didn't matter. But man, using a handsaw, this is where I'm at. This is my happy zone. I feel so much more efficient with these guys. Looks a lot cleaner, it's a lot more fun. Like, I barely had to touch it with a sander. Mostly just did that just because putty it. The little holes were, I kind of got a little sideways when I was pre-drilling the second one. Also, anytime you're using putty, especially solvent-based putty, keep that lid just on there, even if it's on there loosely. That way it doesn't dry out too quickly. Cutting these piano hinges, luckily on the other side, that black screen is a metal fabricator. So I use his bandsaw and cut them real quick, and then I just file them out. Put a couple test screws in, get it lined up, and then I'll go through and bore them all out. Especially when working with maple like this, pre-drilling is like so beneficial. So what I just did there real quick was I stuck an 1/8" piece of glue on under this solid piece of the lid to give them flat, to get it flat at the same plane. Just sanding off my marks real quick, blowing out the dust, and now we'll test fit it. And to make sure I had the right orientation, because we're about to mark it for putting a T-nut in. That way that safety lock will stay in place. Using the Forstner bit just to get deep enough to put the T-nut flush, and then hammer it in after you bore out the hole for all the way through. Now we'll test fit it. Now I'm just marking it because I got to go pick up the right size. I could cut that one down, but I'll probably just go pick one up at the store up here, and also get a spacer. That way I can't the screw can't get over tight, and that way there's always enough gap for it to slide freely. Gluing on some maple on the side to hide the 3/4 and the 1/8" Lugon spacer, as well as a quarter cap, just to make it look more like a solid piece of wood. After I get it glued in, nailed in, I'll just clamp it up. So a lot of people don't know, a clamp only has enough pressure as in a triangle. If you're gluing a 1" piece, it only goes out that 45". If you're gluing a 16", then that expansion of pressure is a lot further, but something most people often overlook Now we're just adding some maple to the tops, mostly for visibility, but also a little bit of structure gain as well. Made a scrap bin that sits on the right side of the miter saw, and so anytime I need a spacer, I just grab those. But now I've actually built a spacer case right at my table, so I have a lot of spaces on hand, easy without having to go dig in the scrap bin. This is my preferred way of mounting hinges or drawer slides. That way I know they're exact on each side. Again, not having to measure keeps things more accurate for me. And just working down backwards to keep it truly flush as much as possible. If I was wise, the first set I would did everything just on the middle drawer, front and back. But there was always a workaround. When you make a mistake, it's just usually figured out how to fix it. I wouldn't have been doing this if I would have did what I just said a second ago. So Jared actually is going to feature this on his page as well. Just kind of show it off. Again, Mark's going to be selling a completed kit. If you want to buy a completed kit, have it shipped to your house. The length can be adjusted, like I said, but this client, for the one she wanted so much haul space, so that adjusted it. And every inch you take off of depth is technically taking 3 inches off. And if you prefer, you'd rather try to figure out one on your own, just reach out to me. I'll help you out with numbers and stuff.
He built how many prototypes?
This is Proto 3.
This is Proto 3.
2.7 really. Yeah.
We'll
really
call it
2.7.
3.
Mark came to me with the thought of how can we make a single system into a full. Goes from 25 inches deep all the way to 66 inches deep. It's our first stock pattern of it. We've got another core design that's in the works, but this is the first one style going into a client build. You know, this is a functioning prototype. That this one will probably just stay at the shop just to give us a seating at lunchtime. That way it can be one person at lunch or 3.
There you go. Kind of see it from above. Now that, wait, you were just pulled out. Is that a storage bin? And what is this depth? Oh, trusty tape measure. I love those tapes. It's not even a tape measure.
So this is 25 3/4 by 23 1/4 by 18 1/4. But this is a comfortable seating height. Well, it's also cool. It's not just a bed. You know, it can also give you the flexibility.
Is it a Chase Lounge?
Kind of a Chase Lounge. So yeah, you can determine how far it pulls out. The next design is going to be really cool too.
Yeah, you're excited to get into that, right?
Yeah.